There is a moment in almost every human being's life when a single purchase changes everything. I'm not just talking about spending money, but about creating a chain reaction that completely transforms how you live, how you see yourself, and most importantly, how much money slips through your hands without you noticing. This silent transformation happened to a French philosopher named Denis Diderot in 1765, and the irony is that he was brilliant, famous, respected, but completely broke. He lived in a simple house, wore old clothes, sat in a creaky chair, and was perfectly happy with all of this until Empress Catherine the Great of Russia decided to buy his library for an amount equivalent to $50,000 today, allowing him to keep the books. Suddenly, Diderot had money, and like anyone who finally gets to breathe financially, he decided to treat himself. He bought a luxurious scarlet robe, the kind of garment kings would wear, elegant, expensive, and completely out of line with everything he owned. When he put on that robe and looked at himself in the mirror, something strange began to happen inside his mind. He felt rich, sophisticated, but when he sat at his old desk full of ink stains and scratches, he realized something was deeply wrong. The robe was magnificent, but the desk was a visual insult to the elegance he now carried on his body. The psychological tension was unbearable, so he replaced the desk with a beautiful mahogany writing table. Now the robe and desk matched perfectly, but when he looked down, the old carpet seemed like a humiliating rag before the beauty of the new furniture. So he bought an expensive, soft Damascus carpet, but this made the curtains look like garbage hanging on the wall. He replaced the curtains, which made the chair look like firewood about to collapse. He bought a leather armchair, then new paintings, sculptures, mirrors, all to maintain the visual coherence of the environment. Months passed and Diderot spent every cent the Empress had given him, systematically replacing every object in his house until everything matched the quality of that scarlet robe. In the end, he was broke again, but this time with a beautiful house and deep regret. He wrote a famous essay called Regrets on Parting with My Old Dressing Gown, where he confessed a devastating truth. I was the absolute master of my old dressing gown, but I became a slave to the new one. This phrase should be engraved on the forehead of every person about to make an expensive purchase, because it perfectly summarizes what happens when we bring a luxury item into our lives. We don't own things, things own us, and they begin to dictate how we should live, what we should buy next, and how much money we should keep spending to maintain the illusion of coherence. Diderot discovered that the introduction of a new possession into a consumer's existence often results in a process of spiraling consumption, where one purchase drags the next, which drags the next, until you're in a financial hole without knowing how you got there. The most frightening thing is that this pattern didn't die in 1765. It's more alive and dangerous today than ever. You might be thinking this is just the story of a Frenchman who lived 300 years ago and wore extravagant robes, but the truth is you're living this same story now, perhaps at this very moment. The Diderot effect hasn't disappeared. It's been weaponized, transformed into science, and inserted into every marketing campaign, every store window, every ad that appears in your feed. Companies know exactly how to plant that scarlet robe in your life, whether it's a new iPhone, a luxury car, or a Peloton, because they know you'll feel the same psychological tension that Diderot felt. They know you'll look around and realize that everything in your life is outdated, ugly, unworthy of the new status that object represents, and then you'll start spending. The cruelest part is that before buying that item, you were perfectly happy with what you had. Your old carpet wasn't a problem until you had the new furniture. Your desk wasn't ugly until you wore the expensive robe. Your old phone worked fine until you held the latest model in your hands. The purchase didn't bring happiness, it created dissatisfaction with everything you already owned. And now you need to spend even more money just to get back to the level of contentment you had before spending the first cent. This is the most perverse psychological trick of modern consumerism. Selling the solution to a problem they themselves created by selling the initial product. The reason the Diderot effect works so well has nothing to do with the objects themselves, but with who you believe you are when you own them. When you buy something high status, you're not just acquiring a product, you're buying an identity, a new version of yourself that requires a completely different environment to exist. If you've always been a Honda Civic person, you're comfortable eating fast food, wearing worn jeans, and living in a simple apartment, because all of this is coherent with the story you tell about yourself. But the moment you stretch your budget and buy a Porsche, you didn't just buy a car, you bought a new narrative, and this narrative has very specific rules about how you should behave, dress, and spend money. People who drive Porsches don't wear scratched sunglasses bought at a convenience store. People who drive Porsches don't have cheap IKEA furniture in their living room. People who drive Porsches don't eat off paper plates or take vacations at roadside motels. The car becomes the anchor item, the object that defines the new minimum quality floor for your entire life, and everything below that floor creates unbearable psychological tension. You look at your old clothes and feel shame. They haven't changed, but you have, or at least you think you have. The reality is you haven't changed anything except your bank account, but the human mind doesn't work that way. It needs coherence, consistency between what you say you are and what you appear to be. So the car forces you to upgrade your wardrobe, because it would be ridiculous to get out of a Porsche wearing an old t-shirt with holes. The new wardrobe forces you to change where you vacation, because now you can't show up at a 3-star hotel wearing brand-name clothes. Better vacations force you to buy quality luggage, because it would be embarrassing to carry an old plastic suitcase to a 5-star resort. Each upgrade pulls the next, creating an infinite escalator of expenses that you didn't plan, didn't foresee and definitely can't afford, but feel morally obligated to make because it would be inconsistent with the story you started telling. You're not spending money because you want to, you're spending to maintain the illusion that the person you claim to be when you bought that car actually exists. This is why they fake it till you make it advice is financially toxic and dangerous when applied to material goods. If you pretend to be rich by buying a Rolex before you actually have money, that watch will demand a $2,000 suit, a compatible car, expensive dinners at fancy restaurants, and a lifestyle that will drain every cent you earn. The Rolex isn't just a watch, it's a contract you signed without reading the fine print. A contract that says you now need to live like someone who wears a Rolex, and that costs much more than the price of the watch. People think they're buying freedom, status, and respect, but what they're really buying is an expensive prison, where each new object adds more bars to the window. The supreme irony is that the more you try to appear successful through objects, the more enslaved you become to those objects. Diderot understood this perfectly when he wrote that he was master of the old robe, but slave to the new one. The old robe demanded nothing from him. He could use it to wipe his pen, could tear it without guilt, could live freely without fear of ruining something valuable. The new robe brought anxiety, fear of staining it, rigidity in behavior, and the constant need to protect it. When you buy that very expensive white sofa, you stop letting your friends drink red wine in the living room, stop letting the dog climb on the furniture, and stop living in your own living room because now you're a museum curator, not a homeowner. Each luxury item you add to your life removes a piece of your freedom, and very few people realize this until it's too late. You think you're moving up in life, but you're really just adding golden chains, which are still chains. The question isn't whether you should or shouldn't have nice things, but whether you're willing to pay the price that comes with them, the price of constantly maintaining an identity that may not even really be yours. When you understand that each purchase is actually a declaration about who you claim to be, you begin to realize that perhaps the most expensive identity you can have is one that requires constant material proof to continue existing. Most people calculate the cost of an item completely wrong, and this calculation failure is exactly what keeps them trapped in an endless cycle of debt and financial frustration. They look at the price tag, see $500, and ask themselves if they can afford $500, as if that object existed in a vacuum isolated from the rest of life. This is a dangerous illusion, because no object exists alone. Each purchase is actually the first domino in a long line that you don't see until it starts falling. What you need to calculate isn't the price of the item, but the full system cost, the chain reaction cost that item will trigger in your life. Let's take the classic example of a kitchen renovation, where you decide to spend $10,000 on new, modern cabinets. It seems reasonable, you made the budget, researched prices, and $10,000 fits in your financial planning. The cabinets are installed. They're white, minimalist, beautiful. But as soon as the installer leaves your house, you look at the 10-year-old yellowed refrigerator and feel a revulsion you never felt before. The refrigerator works perfectly. It cools, it freezes, it does exactly what a refrigerator should do. But visually it's now an absolute disaster next to those impeccable cabinets. The visual inconsistency is unbearable, so you spend $2,000 on a stainless steel refrigerator that matches the modern aesthetic you created. Now the refrigerator and cabinets look like they came out of a design magazine. But when you look down, the cheap, worn vinyl floor looks like something from an abandoned house. The contrast is glaring. You can no longer ignore that ugly floor that didn't bother you at all before. You rip up the vinyl and install hardwood flooring. Another $5,000 you didn't plan to spend. The kitchen is now perfect, it looks like a work of art, but you live in an open concept house, so when you're standing in the new kitchen and look into the living room looks like a garbage dump in comparison. The old brown sofa looks sad and depressing. The wall paint is faded and dirty, and suddenly you realize the kitchen renovation has leaked into the rest of the house like a virus. You paint the entire downstairs, buy a new sectional sofa, change the light fixtures, and when you finally sit down to add up the expenses, you realize you didn't spend $10,000. You spent $35,000, and every extra cent was a surprise you didn't see coming. The $10,000 cabinets were the scarlet robe. They were the anchor item that made everything else seem inadequate. And if you had kept the old cabinets, you never would have hated the floor, never would have noticed the refrigerator, never would have cared about the living room. You were happy with all of this before you started messing with it, but the upgrade created dissatisfaction, manufactured a problem that didn't exist, and then sold you the solution at an absurd price. This same dynamic happens with absolutely any item you buy. Whether it's an iPhone, a Peloton, or an expensive pair of sneakers. You buy the iPhone Pro Max for $1,200 thinking that's it, but then the old cable looks like garbage next to the elegance of the device, so you buy the MagSafe charger for $40. The cheap plastic case is now a visual insult to the phone's titanium, so you spend $60 on a leather case. Your wired headphones don't work properly anymore, so you need the AirPods Pro for $250. In 48 hours, that $1,200 phone has turned into a $1,600 expense, and you didn't even realize you were being manipulated by the initial purchase itself. Here's the terrifying revelation that most people never have. Upgrades are often downgrades in disguise. When Diderot had the old robe, he didn't worry about ink stains. He used the fabric to clean his pen without guilt. He was functional and free. When he bought the new robe, he became paralyzed with fear of ruining it, became rigid, lost the freedom to be himself. When you buy that very expensive white sofa, you stop living in your own living room, you stop allowing friends to drink red wine near it, stop letting children jump on it, stop really relaxing because now you're a museum guard watching over a valuable piece. You thought you were improving your life, but you actually became a slave to an object that demands constant care and robs you of the spontaneity of existing without fear. Now that you understand how this psychological trap works, the question that's probably hammering in your head is how the hell can you stop this? How do you break a pattern that's literally programmed into your brain that exploits the human need for coherence and consistency in such a brutal and efficient way? The answer isn't to live in a cave, wear torn clothes and never buy anything nice for the rest of your life. That's neither realistic nor healthy. But what you can do is build mental firewalls, strategic barriers that prevent the Diderot effect from spreading through your life like an uncontrolled fire. The first and most powerful defense is to predict the chain reaction before hitting the buy button. Before buying any item that's a significant upgrade, whether it's a new car, a video game console, or an expensive suit, you need to pause everything and ask an honest question. What else will this item demand from me after I bring it home? If you're thinking about buying a PlayStation 5 for $500, will it require a 4K TV so you can see the graphics at maximum quality? Will it require an extra controller to play with friends, a PlayStation Plus subscription, a gaming headset, maybe even a comfortable chair because now you're going to spend hours playing? Literally write on a piece of paper the full system cost, not just the cost of the isolated item. If the PlayStation costs $500, but the complete system costs $1,500, when you add everything it will inevitably require, the real question is whether you can afford $1,500. If the answer is no, then you can't buy the anchor item because you'd be inviting a vampire into your house, a vampire that will suck your money in small bites that you'll barely notice until you're completely drained. This conscious anticipation of the real cost breaks the illusion that you're making just a small, harmless purchase. It forces you to face the truth head-on before making the mistake. The second strategy is to implement the buy one, donate one rule, because the Diderot effect thrives on the accumulation of objects. We add the new thing but keep all the old things, and then try to force everything to match visually, creating tension and discomfort. You need to put a ceiling on your inventory of possessions. Establish a physical limit that cannot be exceeded. If you buy a new pair of sneakers, an old pair needs to leave the house immediately, whether donated, sold, or thrown in the trash. If you buy a new toaster, the old toaster can't stay stored in a cupboard waiting for a day when it might be useful, it needs to go. This simple rule forces you to value what you already have, because now each new acquisition has an emotional and practical cost. You need to give up something. It prevents you from building a shrine of accumulated possessions where each object competes for your attention and money. Keeps you in the mindset of a user of things, not an obsessed collector who treats objects like sacred relics. When you know you can only have 5 pairs of sneakers, you think 10 times before buying the 6th, because you'll need to say goodbye to one of the 5 you already own and probably like. The third strategy is the most radical, but also the most effective for those who really want to get off this infinite consumption wheel. Practice strategic downgrading. Sometimes, the only way to reset your psychological baseline is to deliberately downgrade a visible part of your life. Choose a status symbol and intentionally keep it humble. Drive a car slightly older than you could afford. Wear a simple, functional watch instead of a Rolex. Wear quality clothes, but without giant luxury brand logos stamped on everything. When your anchor items are humble and discreet, you feel zero pressure to upgrade everything else in your life. If you drive an old, beat-up Toyota truck, nobody expects you to wear a $2,000 suit or dine at expensive restaurants every week. You have freedom. Freedom to wear old jeans. Freedom to eat a burrito inside the car without fear of staining the upholstery. Freedom to live without the constant anxiety of keeping up appearances. By keeping your status symbols low, you drastically reduce the cost needed to maintain the rest of your life. You create a low-maintenance identity that doesn't require constant material proof. And let me tell you something that very few people understand. A low-maintenance identity is the most profitable asset you can own. It allows you to accumulate real money while everyone around you is busy curating their personal museums, spending fortunes to maintain the illusion of success. You don't need to prove anything to anyone through objects. And when you deeply internalize this truth, you free yourself from a prison that most people don't even know they're locked in. There's nothing wrong with having nice things, but you need to understand the game you're playing and the rules that govern every purchase you make.